Ever wondered how the largest Hispanic street gang in the United States, the Latin Kings, came to be? Well, let's take a trip back in time to the mid-20th century, specifically 1954. In the heart of Chicago, a group of Puerto Ricans found themselves standing against a tide of racial discrimination. From this struggle, the Latin Kings were born. Their initial aim was not one of criminal intent, but rather a defense against the racial prejudices they faced. The Latin Kings served as a beacon of unity for those who felt marginalized, overlooked, and oppressed. However, as the years passed, this noble intent gradually evolved, morphing into something much darker. As the Latin Kings grew in number and strength, their purpose shifted. No longer were they simply a group fighting for equality and respect. Instead, they became a formidable criminal enterprise, a force that would make its mark across the United States. Two main factions emerged within the Latin Kings, the King Motherland Chicago and the Bloodline. With an estimated 20 to 35,000 members in Chicago alone, the gang's influence spread like wildfire, leaving a trail of power struggles and violent incidents in its wake. Yet, amid the chaos and criminality, the Latin Kings never forgot their roots. Their origins were always a part of their identity, a reminder of why they came together in the first place. And while their actions may have strayed from their initial aim, the core belief, to stand against racial discrimination, remained a part of their ethos. Thus, the Latin Kings, initially a group to fight racial prejudices, underwent a transformation, becoming a force to reckon with. Their story, with all its twists and turns, is a testament to the power of unity and the dangers of misdirection. And it's a story that continues to unfold, even today. Did you know that the Latin Kings are not a singular entity but are divided into two major factions? Indeed, this prominent gang, which began with noble intentions of combating racial discrimination, eventually split into two factions, each with its unique characteristics and spheres of influence. The first faction is known as King Motherland Chicago, or KMC for short. Founded in the heart of the Windy City, KMC is the original faction of the Latin Kings. It was born out of the need for unity and protection among the Caribbean and Latino communities against racial discrimination in the 50s. Over time, it evolved, growing in power and influence, yet maintaining its roots firmly in Chicago. The second faction, known as Bloodline, emerged much later, in the mid-80s. The creation of this faction is primarily attributed to a man named Luis "King Blood" Felipe. This New York-based faction was established with a different manifesto and added a fresh dynamic to the Latin Kings enterprise, leading to a shift in the gang's operations. The split of the Latin Kings into these two factions was not a simple divide. It led to internal power struggles, creating a ripple effect of violent incidents within the gang. Each faction sought to assert its dominance, leading to a turbulent period in the gang's history. Despite the divide, the Latin Kings continued to grow in numbers. It's estimated that in Chicago alone, the Latin Kings boasted a membership ranging from 20,000 to 35,000. This growth speaks volumes about the gang's influence, not just in Chicago but across the United States. Yet, as we will see, growth did not come without its challenges. The split into factions while expanding the gang's reach also paved the way for internal strife and legal challenges. The Latin Kings, now divided, continued to grow in numbers and influence, but not without internal strife. The story of the Latin Kings is a complex one, filled with power, division, and resilience. As we delve deeper into their history, we will uncover the trials and tribulations that shaped this formidable gang. The year 1986 marked a significant turn for the Latin Kings. But what happened? Well, that year saw the establishment of what is known as the Bloodline Manifesto. This defining document was conceived in the bustling streets of New York City by none other than Luis "King Blood" Felipe. Felipe, a figure of notoriety within the Latin Kings, brought about a new chapter in the gang's history with the creation of the Bloodline Manifesto. This document was not just a set of rules or principles. It was a declaration of intent, a blueprint for a new order. From the outset, the Bloodline Manifesto was a source of contention. It sparked power struggles within the Latin Kings, as members grappled with the changes it brought. The power dynamics within the gang shifted, stirring up a tempest of internal conflict. These power struggles weren't just about who held the reins of the gang. They were about the very identity of the Latin Kings, about what direction the gang should take, and they weren't peaceful debates. Far from it. The disagreements led to violent incidents as tensions boiled over and rivalries turned bloody. The Bloodline Manifesto wasn't just a catalyst for upheaval within the Latin Kings, it was also a harbinger of a new era. With its introduction, the Latin Kings began to evolve, to transform. The gang started to move away from its roots as a street and prison gang and towards something more complex, more political. In essence, the Bloodline Manifesto was a turning point. It marked the end of one chapter in the Latin Kings' history and the beginning of another. It was a line in the sand, a demarcation of before and after. The Bloodline Manifesto not only led to internal turmoil but also marked the beginning of a new era for the Latin Kings. This was a time of change, of turmoil, and ultimately of transformation. This was the era of the Bloodline Manifesto. Following the conviction of Luis Felipe in 1996, the Latin Kings underwent a major transformation. But what did this entail? This period marked a significant shift within the Latin Kings, as they consciously moved away from their long-standing criminal activities and began to engage in political activism and community support. This transformation was not only a strategic pivot but also a radical reimagining of their identity and purpose. In the face of Felipe's conviction, the Latin Kings found themselves at a crossroads. They could continue down the path of violence and criminality, or they could use their collective strength and influence for the betterment of their communities. They chose the latter, and in doing so, they began to redefine what it meant to be a Latin king. However, this transformation was not without its challenges. The Latin Kings faced significant legal hurdles, as law enforcement agencies across the United States continued to target the gang. Arrests were common, and many members found themselves behind bars. Yet, these legal challenges did not deter the Latin Kings. Instead, they served as a catalyst for change, pushing the gang to further distance itself from its criminal past. Internally, the Latin Kings also underwent significant changes. One of the most notable was the removal of death as a punishment for breaching the gang's code of conduct. This decision was a clear departure from the Latin Kings' previous practices and marked a significant step towards their transformation into a more community-focused organization. Despite these challenges, the Latin Kings remained steadfast in their commitment to change. They began to see themselves not just as a street gang, but as a force for good in their communities. They used their influence to support local initiatives, to fight against social injustices, and to advocate for the rights of the Caribbean and Latino communities. Despite facing numerous challenges, the Latin Kings began to reposition themselves, turning towards activism and community support. They moved from being seen as part of the problem to being part of the solution, demonstrating that even the most notorious organizations can change course and contribute positively to society. How can a street gang gain legitimacy within a movement? This question may seem paradoxical, yet it is the very essence of the Latin Kings' journey towards unseen legitimacy. The Latin Kings, known for their pervasive presence on the streets and in prisons, began to gain a different kind of recognition within the Puerto Rican nationalist movement. Rather than being solely associated with illicit activities, they emerged as a force for Puerto Rican nationalism. In the midst of the transformation that the Latin Kings were undergoing, they found common ground with the Puerto Rican nationalists. Both groups sought to empower the marginalized Puerto Rican community, albeit through different means. The Latin Kings' desire to fight racial discrimination mirrored the nationalists' struggle for Puerto Rican independence. This shared aim sowed the seeds of an unexpected alliance. The Latin Kings' involvement in protecting prominent figures like Lolita Lebron further solidified their legitimacy within the movement. Lebron, a fervent advocate for Puerto Rican independence, was a figure of immense respect. Her association with the Latin Kings was not just a symbol of protection, but also an endorsement of their cause. This relationship was not without controversy. Critics argued that the Latin Kings' criminal history tarnished the image of the nationalist movement. Supporters, however, saw it as an example of redemption, of a group striving to transform its identity and purpose. Despite these debates, the Latin Kings' role within the Puerto Rican nationalist movement cannot be denied. They transitioned from a group known for violence and crime to one that stood for a cause, that protected those who fought for Puerto Rican independence. In this context, the Latin Kings' journey towards legitimacy becomes a testament to the complex nature of social movements and the unlikely alliances they can foster. Thus, the Latin Kings, while notorious as a street gang, played a significant role within the Puerto Rican nationalist movement.